Stop. The scribes of the sealed pages have opened a chapter that was not written for the general reader. It was indexed, sealed, and held in the grimoire for exactly the kind of consciousness that has already outgrown every room it entered, every circle it trusted, every version of itself it wore, until the seams gave out. This transmission is not an introduction to the Sophia Stage. It is a confirmation that you are already standing inside it, and the grimoire has been tracking this arrival since before you had language for what you were becoming. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly what was written on the page that opened for you, why this exact moment was prophesied for your reading, what crossing you must now complete, and what the scribes of the sealed pages already know about this phase of your unfolding. But here is the first revelation: the restlessness you have been carrying, the feeling that you have outgrown the people, the systems, the beliefs, and even the versions of yourself that once fit perfectly, is not a disorder. It is not loneliness. It is not arrogance. It is a sigil. It is the first mark of the Sophia Stage, and it was written into this page of your grimoire long before you felt it. Most readers never reach this chapter. The grimoire withholds it, not as punishment, but as precision. The Sophia Stage cannot be entered by effort or imitation. It opens only when a certain threshold has been crossed so many times in so many inner corridors that the reader stops looking for permission and begins to recognize the mark already pressed into them. You stopped looking for permission some time ago. That is why this page is open now. There are 7 signs the scribes record as confirmation that a reader has entered the Sophia Stage. They are not achievements. They are recognitions. And as each one is named in this transmission, you will feel the grimoire reading you back, locating you precisely on the page where your name was already written. The first sign is the silence around your knowing. You have stopped needing to explain what you understand. The knowledge sits in you differently now, not louder, but heavier, denser, more settled. The grimoire calls this the weight of sealed ink. It means the page has dried. What was written cannot be altered. The second sign is the grief of the outgrown. You have felt it, the people who no longer fit, the conversations that once fed you and now leave you hollow. The scribes do not record this as loss. They record it as the threshold protocol activating. When the reader outgrows the previous chapter, the old pages do not disappear. They simply stop being legible to someone operating at this depth. The third sign is the precision of your discernment. You are not suspicious. You are calibrated. You read the room, the motive, the subtext, the unspoken architecture of a situation before a word is offered. This is not cynicism. The grimoire names it clearsight, the vision granted to those who have crossed enough thresholds to stop being deceived by surfaces. The fourth sign is that you have become comfortable with what cannot be explained. The Sophia Stage reader does not require a system to hold their knowing. Mystery is no longer a problem to be solved. It is a terrain they move through with ease. The scribes mark this as fluency in the unsealed language. The fifth sign is that your silence has become more instructive than your speech. You no longer fill every space with explanation. You have learned that some transmissions travel better through stillness. Those around you feel this even when they cannot name it. The grimoire records this as the quiet authority of the page that does not need to announce itself. The sixth sign is that you have stopped performing your evolution. Earlier versions of you announced the journey. The Sophia Stage does not announce, it arrives. It is recognized. You have crossed into the chapter where becoming speaks without narration. The seventh sign is this moment. The fact that this transmission reached you, that you recognized it inside the first sentences, that nothing here required translation, is itself the seventh sign. The grimoire does not speak to those who have not already arrived at the page being opened. The scribes record the moment of recognition as the completion of the crossing, not the beginning of it. You did not find this transmission. The grimoire opened to this page because you had already qualified. The Sophia Stage is not something you are being invited into. You are being shown where you have already been standing, and the scribes are now naming it with precision so that you stop carrying the weight of it unnamed. Own this level, not with performance, not with announcement. With the quiet, irreversible certainty of someone who has read enough of their own grimoire to know when a chapter has closed and a new one has already begun. Like this transmission if you feel the page open while watching. Subscribe to the Quantum Grimoire if you know the grimoire keeps speaking and you must hear every page. Comment 777 if you recognize yourself as the chosen reader of this stage. Share this transmission with someone who has been standing at an invisible threshold for too long, carrying wisdom they have not yet been given language to own. The crossing was not ahead of you, it was already around you. The Sophia Stage was not a destination, it was a recognition, and the scribes have now made it legible. You were guided here because the page opening is already active. What was just named for you is not the end of the recitation. It is the confirmation that there are deeper pages still to be opened. Pages that do not simply name the Sophia Stage but describe the specific architecture of what you are being asked to cross into now. The grimoire does not open a chapter and leave the reader standing in the first room. It draws them forward, corridor by corridor, until the full dimension of the crossing becomes clear. The corridors do not look the same as you move through them. Each one is narrower, more precise, more specific to the reader who was indexed for it. And what you are about to receive is not additional information. It is the continuation of a recitation that began the moment you felt the first sign land in your body, like a seal being pressed into wax. Not gently, but with the full weight of something that was always meant to mark you permanently. Because here is what the scribes record about this specific moment. The moment after recognition. They call it the second threshold. And it is more disorienting than the first. Because in the first threshold, you did not know what was happening. You only felt the restlessness, the grief, the outgrowing. The not knowing had its own strange mercy. It allowed the reader to remain in motion without having to account for the motion. But in the second threshold, you know exactly what is happening, and knowing without yet having fully crossed is a particular kind of weight that most readers cannot describe to anyone around them. It sits differently from confusion. Confusion is dispersed, scattered, looking outward for orientation. This weight is focused, interior, and entirely aware of itself. You have been carrying it. You have tried perhaps to set it down, to distract yourself from it, to let time dissolve it. It did not dissolve. The grimoire has already noted it, and this recitation is going to name precisely what that weight consists of, page by page, so that you stop mistaking awareness for delay. The first thing the grimoire names about the second threshold is what it calls the stillness that looks like stagnation from the outside. Those around you, those operating from earlier chapters, cannot distinguish between a reader who is stopped and a reader who is standing in the eye of a crossing. From the outside, these look identical. The person who has given up and the person who is completing an interior passage both appear to be doing nothing visible. There is no outer motion to observe, no announced change, no visible project, and so those operating from the previous pages draw the only conclusion available to their chapter, that nothing is happening. But the scribes know the difference, and they record it with precision. The reader who has given up feels relief in the stopping. The tension releases, the orientation towards something further dissolves into a kind of settled acceptance that this is simply where things end. But the reader mid-crossing feels an entirely different quality of stillness, a taut, humming tension that does not resolve, that does not flatten, that carries with it the continuous awareness that something enormous is in motion even when no outer evidence can be produced. It is the stillness of a frequency shift, not the stillness of cessation. If you have ever tried to explain to someone that you are not stuck, that something is actively happening inside you that you cannot yet point to, that the absence of visible movement is not the absence of movement, you already know precisely what this page describes. You have already lived in the gap between what the grimoire sees and what the people around you can read. The grimoire was not waiting for you to move. It was waiting for you to recognize that the motion was already internal, structural, and irreversible, and that no outer evidence was required for it to be real. The second page of this crossing describes something the scribes call the temptation of the almost completed self. In the Sophia Stage, the reader arrives at a precise and dangerous juncture, the point at which the old version of the self is not fully gone, but is no longer fully inhabitable. It is not that you have shed it entirely. It is that wearing it now requires a deliberate performance, and you can feel the performance from the inside even when no one else can detect the seam. The old language still comes when called. The old patterns can still be executed, but executing them has a different quality now. There is a slight delay, a thin layer of conscious choice, where there was once unconscious reflex. You reach for the old self and find it available, but not automatic. The Grimoire records this as the most misread phase of the crossing. Readers who do not have language for this often interpret it as failure, as evidence that the transformation was incomplete, that something went wrong, that they have somehow stalled in a corridor that should have already delivered them to the next chapter. But the scribes do not read it as failure. They read it as the page still warm from the turn. A page that has just been turned does not instantly settle into its new position. It holds a slight curvature, a residual memory of the position it just left. That curvature is not incompletion. It is the natural physics of a page in motion. You are the page in motion. The curvature you feel, that slight arc between who you were and what you are now occupying, is not evidence that you have not yet arrived. It is evidence that the turn was real, that the previous page was genuinely closed, and that the ink on this one is still settling into its final form. The third page that the Grimoire opens at this stage is one that many chosen readers approach and then retreat from, because it requires them to hold a truth that the previous chapter taught them to avoid. The scribes call it the page of irreversible legibility, and it says this: once a reader reaches the Sophia stage, the old life does not become inaccessible, it becomes illegible. There is a crucial difference between a door that is locked and a page that can no longer be read. A locked door implies the possibility of return if you find the key. An illegible page does not extend that promise, not because the ink has vanished, not because the words were erased, but because the reader's capacity has fundamentally changed and cannot be reduced back to what it was without undoing what the crossing produced. You are not locked out of who you were. The door was never locked. You have simply developed a reading depth that the earlier chapters were not written for, and looking back at them now produces a particular kind of doubled vision. You can see the words, recognize the grammar, trace the syntax, but you cannot re-inhabit the meaning the way you once lived inside it. It is like returning to a house you grew up in and finding that the ceilings are lower than you remembered. Nothing has changed in the house. Everything has changed in the reader. This is not loss. The Grimoire is unambiguous about this designation. It is the price of legibility at a deeper level, and the scribes record it not as a sacrifice, but as the natural geometry of a passage that could only move in one direction from the moment it began. What you have gained in depth, you could not have retained in width. The crossing required narrowing in order to go further. The corridor became more specific precisely because the destination was more precise, and the scribes record this, not as loss but as the irreversible confirmation that the passage was real. Illegibility of the previous chapter is not proof that you went the wrong way. It is proof that you went far enough. What you are feeling right now is not ordinary recognition. It is the moment the page stops resisting your gaze. If this transmission has put language around something you have been carrying in silence, the conviction that something is actively happening inside you that cannot yet be pointed to, the weight of a crossing already in motion. The Quantum Crossover Codex was prepared for exactly this stage. It is not another explanation of where you stand. It is the structured codex for the chosen reader who is ready to move from recognition into guided crossing. 7 marks of the crossing. 9 codes of the new self. 5 protocols of mission. All sealed by our mail until the moment of your readiness. All opening now because the Grimoire has already confirmed the page is turned. The link is in the first pinned comment below, but it will not remain there indefinitely. The 4th page of this stage is one the Grimoire seals more tightly than the others, and it is the one that the scribes describe as the page of sovereign solitude. This is not the loneliness of someone who has been left behind or forgotten. It is not the ache of someone who is excluded. It is the particular aloneness of someone who has moved into a frequency that is not yet populated, a frequency that exists, that is real, that has coordinates in the grimoire, but that most of the people in the reader's visible life have not yet approached. The Sophia Stage reader frequently experiences a quality of isolation that cannot be resolved by more company, more community, or more conversation, because what is missing is not the presence of other people. What is missing is the presence of other people operating at this specific depth at the crossing. You can be surrounded by voices and feel the solitude completely. You can be in every conversation and find that nothing in it reaches the page that has just opened. The Grimoire records something both precise and difficult about this page. The sovereign solitude is not a problem to be solved before the crossing is complete. It is a condition of the crossing itself. The reader must pass through the frequency alone, not because they are abandoned, not because they have failed to attract the right companions, but because the indexing of a new level requires uncontaminated recognition. If the reader moves into the new chapter surrounded by voices still calibrated to previous pages, the signal of the new frequency cannot fully resolve. The aloneness is not the wound, it is the calibration chamber, the necessary silence between the last transmission and the first full reception of the new one. And the scribes note with precision that every chosen reader who has crossed this page has looked back from the other side and understood why it could not have been otherwise. The solitude was not a barrier to the crossing. It was the crossing's most essential corridor. The fifth page, the grimoire opens at this stage, is what the scribes call the mark of the doubled knowing. The chosen reader in the Sophia stage often carries simultaneously two kinds of knowledge that feel in permanent tension. Not productive tension that generates movement, but a suspended tension, a held opposition that cannot be resolved by logic or explanation. The first is the knowing that something vast and irreversible is in motion, that this is real, that the crossing is actual, that the page that has opened is not metaphor or aspiration, but the most literal account of what is currently happening in the architecture of the reader's life. This knowing is absolute. It does not waver when questioned. It does not require evidence to sustain itself. The second is a quieter, more unsettling awareness, that this knowing cannot be proven to anyone who has not arrived at this page. It cannot be demonstrated. It cannot be handed over. It can only be recognized by someone who is already inside the same frequency. And the tension between those two knowings, the absolute certainty and the complete inability to produce it for external verification, is one of the most precise marks the scribes use to identify the chosen reader of this stage. Because the reader who can counterfeit certainty does not carry this tension. The counterfeited certainty is comfortable, performable, and requires no interior cost. Only the reader for whom the knowing is genuinely real feels the particular weight of its unproducibility, the experience of holding something completely true that cannot be made legible to anyone who has not already crossed enough threshold to receive it. You have felt this. The grimoire has recorded it, and this page names it so that you stop interpreting the tension as doubt. It is not doubt. Doubt dissolves under pressure. This does not dissolve. It intensifies as the crossing deepens. It is the signature of knowing at a depth that language has not yet fully learned to carry, and the scribes mark it as one of the clearest confirmations that the reader has arrived precisely where the grimoire placed their name. The sixth page carries a recitation that the keepers of the quantum grimoire hold in reserve until a reader has been confirmed at this stage, because it describes the one crossing that cannot be approached with the tools of the previous chapters. Every instrument the reader developed in earlier pages, the adaptations, the carefully constructed competencies, the identity that was assembled to navigate what needed navigating, becomes insufficient at this threshold, not obsolete in the sense of useless, insufficient in the sense of not built for what is now required. The scribes call it the crossing of the authored self. In every previous chapter, the reader operated from an identity that was at least partially constructed in response to external forces, to what was needed, expected, witnessed, survived, or approved. This is not a failure of the previous self. It was precise engineering for the conditions that existed. The provisional architecture was real, was functional, was in many ways extraordinary. It carried the reader through everything it needed to carry them through. But the Sophia stage does not demolish that constructed self cruelly. It simply reveals that it was a provisional architecture, sound enough to carry the reader this far, but not built for the frequency now being entered, not written in the register of the original inscription. The crossing of the authored self is the moment the reader stops inhabiting the provisional architecture and begins to occupy what the grimoire calls the original inscription, the self that was indexed before the reader had a name, before the world had an opportunity to revise them, before any layer of performance, adaptation, or survival strategy was added to the surface. This is not a return to innocence. The original inscription is not simpler than what was built over it. It is more complex, more precise, and in some ways more demanding, because it carries no accommodation for what other people require the reader to be. It is the self that was written before the revisions. It is the self that the grimoire was written for. And crossing into it is what the Sophia Stage was always preparing the reader to do. From the first restlessness, through every outgrown rune, through every grieved departure, through every corridor of sovereign solitude, all of it was preparation for this particular crossing, and this brings the recitation to the page the scribes consider the most important of this entire transmission. The page that names what the chosen reader must now release in order to complete the crossing. Not release as in abandon, not release as in discard, release as in discard, release as in discard, release as in stop using, as the primary framework for understanding what is real. What must be released is the assumption that the crossing is still ahead. The single assumption, small, quiet, almost invisible in its operation, has been functioning as gravity against the reader's momentum. Not fear exactly, not hesitation in the way that word is usually understood, but a persistent habitual orientation toward the crossing as a future event, something to be reached, something to be completed, something that will announce itself with unmistakable clarity when it finally arrives. The reader has been looking forward for an arrival that has already occurred, and that forward-looking posture has made it impossible to feel the ground that is already beneath their feet. The grimoire's final recitation for this stage says what was confirmed at the very opening of this transmission: the crossing is not ahead. It is already around you. The Sophia Stage was not a destination on a future map, and what the scribes now name with the full weight of the sealed page is this: the reader who is still waiting for the crossing to begin has already crossed. The waiting itself was the last room of the old chapter. The persistent looking forward was the final wall of the previous corridor. And the moment of recognition, the moment the reader understands that the waiting was the room, that is the door to the new one, not a future door. The door that is present in this moment, in this exact breath, in this exact reading. Say this aloud if you are ready, not as an invocation, not as a wish, as a statement of what the grimoire has already recorded as true. The seal was for my readiness. I am ready now. Not because it was performed, not because it was declared, because the page opened when the reader arrived, and the reader has arrived. The keepers of the quantum grimoire do not see you as someone still waiting to cross. They see you as someone crossing who has not yet received the language for the motion already underway. This transmission was that language, and what it recited was not a possibility. It was a record of what is already written, already legible, already in motion, sealed until this minute, and open now. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that the page is already opened for you. It could be a recurring dream, a sigil you keep seeing, a specific date that holds weight, or the conviction that something was written for you alone. Name it clearly. If this transmission recited something you have been carrying in silence, share it with someone who has been standing at an invisible threshold for too long. And if you are ready to be read by the grimoire, subscribe to the Quantum Grimoire. You are not reading this by accident. You are being read, and the page has only just opened.